So we're actually going to be hosting a live Q&A with some of the Boris FX engineers. So this is unprecedented. We haven't tried this before. It's going to be amazing to hear what some of these leaders, some of the most talented people around in the industry actually have to say about what they're doing right now and where they sort of feel that the industry is going. And to help out with this, we obviously have Ross Shane, the Chief Product Officer, joining us back. Hello, Ross.
Ben, good to see you again.
It's been a while.
Excuse me. This is going to be a fun session. Like you say, it's something we've never done before. Having our engineers live, and we certainly are pushing the limits to our live stream capabilities and experience as well. So it's going to be fun.
It's going to be very interesting. I mean, this is unprecedented. This out of the ones on the presentations on the list. This has been very, very high up on my must see, and I'm lucky to actually be here, right in the room with it. So well, as in the room as anyone is. So shall we have a look at our first guest? Is someone who is very near and dear to Boris FX. It is actually the CEO and founder, Boris Yamnitsky. Hello, Boris.
Hey, hi, Ben. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
All right, great.
How are you today?
Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, very nice to be here. Very interesting format, and definitely a big change from our usual IBC, NAB, SIGGRAPH trips.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. Coming up next, we have John Paul Smith, who is the CEO of Imagineer. So he's in with Mocha. Hello, JP. Oh, we have delays there.
Is that better?
That is a lot better, yes.
Super. Well, hi everyone. Great to be here.
Thank you very much. So, JP, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I run the Mocha team over in the UK. So we've been working on Mocha and its predecessor technologies now for close to 20 years. Starting out with Moki, with the first iteration of the planar tracker, and then continuing to today. So I was involved as a programmer right from the beginning there, and now look after the Mocha team.
Fantastic. Well, we've also got our lead developer on Sapphire, Larissa Supnick. Hello, Larissa. Can you hear me?
Hello, Ben. Yes, I can hear you.
We have Larissa here. Fantastic. And how are you today?
Pretty good. It's a little warmer here than I'd like, but is what it is. Yes, quite. Okay. Coming up from the Continuum side, we have lead developer Jason Clement. Hello, Jason.
Hello.
Oh, there we go. We found you in the white void. That is the
yes, indeed. Well, it's the dungeon here, my basement. So, hiding the detritus you'll see behind the white wall.
Oh, it's very good. It's very good. Set dressing is 80% of all product development, I hear.
Yeah, I need some painters to come in and spruce it up a little bit.
And finally, we have lead developer of optics and silhouette. He's been in the chat for some of today. Paul Miller. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Wonderful to see you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, just about. There's a slight delay, but we can hear you all right.
Yeah, it was working before.
Oh, now we're good. Now we're good. That's perfect.
Great. Okay.
Fantastic. And doing most of the heavy lifting is Ross, who is going to be leading and hosting our presentation, our Q&A today. I'll be on the chat, so if you have questions for this team, then please get them in at borisfxlive.com or on our YouTube chat. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Ross. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Well, I think because we have a bunch of us online at the same time, I think everyone knows with the Zoom calls, it can be difficult to manage. So I'm just going to try to moderate the conversation a little bit, and I'll be kicking around some questions to each of you. So, well, why don't we start with the man himself, Boris? Boris, I think people would really love to know, how you got into computer programming and sort of a little bit about your history, maybe, where you came from, where you went to school, how you got into this industry, and if you had any specific influences that helped you get into the industry, that would be really interesting.
Sure. How much time do we have?
Yeah.
I know it's only 1 hour. So I started programming in high school, and that was back in the early 70s, back in Russia. So the programming was actually done on a piece of paper in machine code, and you write all your machine instructions, and you have a set of instructions next to you, and you write everything down, and at the end of the class, you just hand it over, and a week later, and it will be run at the university in the computing center on a large IBM-like machine, and then about a week later, they'll come back to you and they'll give you your result of your program with a grade. So that was my first programming experience. Few years fast forward, in college, I had a much more advanced environment, which consisted of a bunch of pins with holes. It's kind of like a precursor to a punch card. So you would write a program on a piece of paper, and then you assemble your program in a matrix-like surface of the machine with those pins. And of course, at the end of the assignment, you have to take apart your program. So you have to take out all the pins and put them back in where they belong. So very tedious work, and you can only imagine, those of you who program, you can only imagine the debugging process. So there was no debugging process, and I remember at the exam, I was asked, what's the principle of architecture of this computer? And I was so annoyed with it, so I answered that, well, yeah, there's a white with the back room, and there's a guy in the back room with abacus who would sit and just, add up all the numbers and send me the result. That didn't fly very well with the professors. But anyway, so first computing experience back in the early 70s were kind of fun. And when I saw a first deck of punch cards, that was a game changer for me. You can actually write your program on a punch card and store it forever. You can put it on your shelf and own it for life. And that actually, it's a very fundamental experience of computer programming. You write something and you can have it for life. So anyway, many years fast forward, I think, I'd love to tell you how I started in the visual effects industry and then editing. I was actually one of the lucky first engineers on the Media 100 team that actually introduced a successful Media 100 product into the market, and AB 1993. We're proudly playing back NTSC video from SCSI drives on a Macintosh computer to much applause of the audience without dropping frames. Our nearest competitor, Avid, was actually dropping frames and playing only single fields. For those of you who still know what fields and frames are. So that was my kind of first foray into video and programming and graphical programming for on the computers. I actually prior to that, I came from the newspaper publishing companies that were building those big newspaper publishing and desktop publishing programs in the 80s. And then when I saw in the 90s this emergence of the desktop video editing and potentially in the future visual effects creation on the computer, that was very exciting because I remember 10 years earlier how big of a revolution that was on the desktop. Like when the first Macintosh, 1984, Macintosh Plus came out, and I owned the very first one. And I just remember all that excitement and how big a difference in the world this made. And that actually what attracted me to analysis and graphics and visual effects. And on the Media 100 team, I was responsible for the visual effects package. Try to guess that. And ever since, I was in this fantastic, amazing space with fantastic, amazing users, customers who create unbelievable visual effects. I was just watching what John Dickinson was doing in the previous section, and I was truly amazed. Have I actually myself participated in creation of this program? I was pinching myself. Very exciting.
That's very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's really neat to see all these faces, and all these, all of us here at the same time, because I think together, or all of you here on the call today have really participated in sort of the growth of the nonlinear editing and visual effects industry. So that's really, really cool. I thought I would kick it over to Paul Miller for a second, because Paul also has a really deep and rich history in visual effects. I mean, Paul, how did you get into the industry? What brought you to programming?
I kind of took to programming as a kid way early on. Back before there were home computers, I ended up at my school. They got a TRS-80, and nobody knew how to use it, and they told this kid, to go play with it. So that's my first access to a computer. Eventually, I started having my own home computer, and then that kind of eventually led to the Amiga computer, which I kind of took off on. I did a lot of audio and music and video and custom development for graphics. It was just a perfect computer for that. As a matter of fact, I bought my Amiga in 1986, and I was saving up money for it, and I didn't know C, so I started learning C because I knew the Amiga was programmed with C, and there was these ROM kernel manuals, which is big, thick books that taught you how to program the kernel for it. And so I bought those first, and so by the time I actually could afford the Amiga, I already knew sort of how to program it. So that it led me to a job that I took in Wisconsin at a company called ASDG in 1992, writing software for the Amiga. But when I arrived in Wisconsin, they had in the corner sitting here this SGI R3000 box, this big expensive purple box in the corner. And I did one little program over the winter of '92, and then they pointed the SGI and said, "Learn that." So I had never done Unix, had never done Motif. So I took the next couple months and learned all about Unix and Motif and programming the SGI. And by NAB, which is the April of '93, I had written version 1 of Elastic Reality, which became the industry standard morphing and warping software for easily a decade after that. So sort of accidentally, I fell into literally the very beginnings of visual effects on computers. It was right around that time where the first movie was completely digitally processed all the way through on a Cineon system, completely digitally, and I just accidentally fell into it. So I started writing, I did Elastic Reality, I did a lightning generator called LFX, which is used quite a bit in television shows. I wrote a wire removal program called No Strings Attached, which was probably one of the most expensive visual effects tools ever written that almost nobody used, but they sold a lot of them to insurance companies because it could be used to paint out scratches and problems with films if there were any problems. That was kind of neat. They were acquired by Avid Technology and started doing 3D titling, and then hooked up with my previous partners at Digital Film Tools, and we started working on what became eventually Optics today, and also Elastic Reality, Silhouette, which came out in 2005, which is well known as rotoscoping and paint, and still going today. So that's sort of the short of it, I guess.
Yeah, Paul, I remember you mentioning SGI. I think we met in the mid '90s at Avid, and I was sort of new to SGI myself when you were. I remember SIGGRAPH where you showed up and said, "Hey, I've created this titling system. I mean, I think you called it Stone Dog at the time, but that actually,
so
for
Stone
those
Dog,
who, yeah.
yeah, that was the code name. But the original sort of in-house name was Titan. It was kind of a silly name. But yeah, we had that running on Windows machines, and I somehow eventually acquired a infinite reality workstation that I had done on my desk, which I was able to work on the SGI version for that.
And for those who are listening, you know, what Stone Dog actually became was Marquee, which was the part of the title studio system in Avid for quite a long time. And it was really groundbreaking at the time. Just the how fast it was. Very impressive stuff. Well, let's kick it over now to Larissa. Larissa, how about yourself? And as you know, I would love to know. You know, how you got to the industry, but maybe throw in like another question. Like, do you remember the first project that you ever coded yourself?
First project I ever coded myself would have been logo. At school, we would program Lego robots, and we would program them to go through mazes and stuff. And I just thought that was awesome. I don't remember what grade that was anymore. So that was probably my first full project. I did Logo and Basic as a kid, and then, you know, was more serious when I got to school. I did virtual reality in college, and then wasn't quite sure. Well, I wanted to work on Star Wars in special effects, and I was crushed that the prequels came out while I was still in school, so I was too young to go work on them. But I went off to college. I did virtual reality and graphics and stuff there, and then I went to grad school and did user interface design and more virtual reality there, and worked at various places while I was there. And then one of my friends pointed me to, or coworker, I guess, pointed me to what was Gen Arts at the time, because he knew Gary Oberbrunner, and said, this is what you want to do, go talk to them. So I talked to Gary, and that's how I got where I was. So that, been here ever since on Sapphire.
Very cool. At least you made that connection to Star Wars, because the Sapphire and the Gen Arts tools were used on, have been used on so many ILM projects over the years. And how long have you been working with the Sapphire team?
I started on Sapphire in 2008, so about 12 years.
And do you personally, I know you sort of manage the team, do you personally have engineering specialty?
On the effects side, I tend to do the splashy effects. So I did Night Sky and Aurora and Pixel Sort. I've done a large percentage of Zap, but Carl did the original Zap. So I've done all the updates to Zap since then. So there's that. But I go everywhere. I do the lens flare updates. When we update the lens flare, I update the UI. When we update the UI, I update licensing. I everything.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we'll definitely come back to you. Just want to make sure we get everyone a chance to kind of make a quick introduction. I'll send it down to Jason. And Jason from the Continuum team, how about yourself? How did you get into programming and then make your way into visual effects?
Yeah, so I guess unlike everybody else so far here, I didn't start out programming as a kid. I was late to that game. I was out of college already with a physics degree, and back running cows with my parents, stringing barbed wire fences, wondering what to do next. And one of my good friends from college called, and back during the dot-com bubble days of the late 90s, said, "Oh, my company's desperate for people." I didn't know how to program at all. I knew nothing, but I had the math and physics background, and that was all they cared about. So that was Ice Effects. I started, I don't know if anybody out there remembers the old Ice Effects boards back. I think we were on Adobe After Effects version 3 when we were starting out there. And I learned the programming pieces kind of on the fly there. They taught me as we went. So And from there, started a company with a friend. We sold a bit of software to another company and kind of were ingested by them. And it was graphics related at first, but then started turning into kind of a mobile company, which just wasn't as much fun. And I saw that Boris had acquired the Final Effects suite and what was Ice Effects. So I sent him a note, and 14 years later, here I am still working with Boris. So in the end, I jumped back into the same code I'd been working on from day one when I first started out.
That's very cool. And as far as like on the Continuum team, I mean, Continuum is certainly a very wide product. I'm kind of curious as to, which parts of Continuum do you feel like the closest to, or do you sort of specialize in?
Yeah,
beyond of course, managing the team.
Yeah, I spend probably half my time just kind of helping make sure everybody is pointed in the right direction. But when I can actually do the programming myself, I spend most of my time on the glue underneath the scenes, kind of helping tie the pieces together. So when Mocha came along line, I did the integration with Mocha to pull that into Continuum. And when we hooked up with the Primat technology, I integrated Primat into the Primat Studio filter. So yeah, most of my time recently has been spent on the kind of glue underneath, as well as the glue that it takes to hook up to all the various hosts we work in. That's one thing slightly strange about the business is it's not just about writing an effect, but then you need to make it work in Avid and Adobe and Resolve and Vegas and everything down the line. And that takes a lot of your time as a programmer, just that integration like that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's something that we're going to talk about in a little bit about the hosts, and at some point, we can kind of open it up a little bit more and turn this into a little bit more of a discussion. Let's just get down to JP, though. JP, probably the person at Boris FX that I personally know the best. I think we've shared many experiences at trade shows, so I'm missing hanging out with you at this IBC in Amsterdam. But JP, tell us about yourself. How about
sure,
for you?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to when I first started programming or doing things with computers, we had computers around in the house pretty much from my earliest memories, doing silly little things in BASIC on the Sinclair ZX81, maybe a machine that no one else here has ever heard of, and Amstrads, that kind of thing, all the 8-bit micros of the 1980s. And then really throughout school, it was, doing things with computers, all kind of random pieces, but a lot of it around audio. And audio and music was probably my biggest interest throughout that time. And then when I went to university, Imperial College, studying computing and electronics, a lot of the projects I did then were about audio. So things like building a spectrum analyzer and automated beat mixing software and this kind of thing. So it was a bit of an accident for me that I ended up working in visual effects. One of the founders of Imagineer was on the same course as I was at university, and he left after 3 years and I carried on and did a 4th year. And at the end of that, he gave me a call and said, "We've started a company doing visual effects software. Would you like to come and join us?" And that was 2001, when they were still, at that time, working on the first version of Moki, a standalone product. And my first job was to turn that into a plugin for Flame. So it was quite interesting that, I think it was probably 2 or 3 months from when I started, and then we were at IBC 2001 on the discrete logic booth at the time, demoing it on Flame, which was very exciting. Sort of startup days. And then, since then, it's been quite a meandering journey for Imagineer. We went away from plugins and, ended up making Mocha as really sort of the distillation of all the different bits of technology that we worked on, focusing back around the planar tracker. And throughout that time, I worked on a lot of the core infrastructure parts of the software. So not really writing the tracker or necessarily effects, but all the glue, a bit similar to what Jason was talking about, all the glue that holds it all together and gives you a product that you can sell, basically. So then I carried on working on that kind of thing till about 2009, when we had a big downsizing in the company and lots of people moving around. And then I took over running things in the UK. And then, we were acquired by Boris in, when was that now? 2015. And since then, really, I've mainly focused on managing the team, and especially that interface between the Mocha team and the rest of the company. And we're helping to make sure the technology we develop in Mocha works with all of the other packages in the company. Mocha's now in Continuum and Sapphire, and it's ended up in all the different products that we make. So there's that interfacing part of it is really interesting for me.
Yeah, it might be a good time to talk a little bit about engineering specialties and what it's like to manage teams of engineers, because Boris FX, we have a lot of different engineers, and some of them have specialties, some of them don't, some are more generalists. So I guess I'll kick up to Boris. How do you feel about working with engineers? Are you looking for engineers who are specialize in one particular area, or are you looking for people who can kind of work across different larger scopes, that kind of thing? And also, I'd love to. I think people would love to know a little bit more about the computer languages that we're using internally.
Oh, okay. First of all, to answer your first question, Rose, I really like to give people the projects that I think or they think they will enjoy. I mean, that's the most important, because that's where people succeed and that's where they work hardest. Although it's not always possible, of course. Whether we look for specialists or generalists, it's always nice to find a specialist if you have a work job at hand. But at the same time, typically what I know throughout my life, programming myself and managing programmers, is essentially programming is learning programming is not hard. There's no such thing as learning programming. You just have to learn how to think logically and how to express your thoughts in a formal way, and then the mechanics of programming are just C language rules, and we use a lot of C++ mostly, some Python, which I actually personally don't even know so well. So to me, it's the mental organization and mental capacity of a programmer that is so much more important than a particular skill, because any skill can be acquired within weeks to just a few months time frame. But I'll tell you, I usually when I look at people's desks, I always think, okay, that must be what's in their mind too. So that's one indication of how person is likely to succeed or likely to conduct a project or programming or product.
You mean how clean their desk is? Is that what you refer to?
Yeah, how well organized. It doesn't have to be clean. You can have a lot of things in it, but if they're in order, that I'll tell you this: I've seen so many desks in my life and so many computer code, and there is a pretty good correspondence.
That might be something interesting to kind of segue into. Maybe Jason or JP or Larissa have some, what's it like to collaborate with engineers and actually keep everyone in line in a sense that, I know you guys talk a lot about documenting things internally so that when another engineer picks up this project, that they know what's going on. Can you talk to that? And feel free, whoever wants to answer that question.
Well, I guess I'll say something to that then. I mean, as far as documentation goes, the best type of documentation is code that you can just read and understand. And one of the key things for maintainability of software. So a lot of what we do is we're writing something and then we're still working on that same code base many years later. And Mocha is a great example of this. There's code in Mocha that was written 20 years ago that we're still using today. And so it's really important to write maintainable code that you can continue to understand and evolve without having to throw it all away because the person who wrote it left the company and you can't understand what it says when it does anymore. So yeah, a lot of that collaboration is making sure that people do things in a way that everyone else in the team understands. And we have one good tool for that is code review. That's something that we do at Boris FX. Whenever anybody makes a change in any of the code bases for any of the products, it gets reviewed by other people in the team. So that second set of eyes is looking at the code and can spot things like, straightforward stuff, but also maintainability issues. Someone's taken a shortcut that is going to cause them problems down the line. And yeah, that kind of tool is very helpful for collaboration. I guess, Paul, it must be very different for you working as you've mostly done by yourself on these kinds of things. Have you found it starting to collaborate with a bigger team?
I think it's been great. It's refreshing. It's been about 20 years since I've worked with other programmers directly. So, but so far it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful just to have other engineers to talk to. I'd have to talk to my other partners who aren't programmers and be like, I'm having this problem, and they just nod and look at me, and then eventually I would figure it out. But now I can talk to real people that know what they're doing, and again, everyone's been very supportive. We've all, I think, worked very well together. It's just sort of a natural fit. Yeah. But I still have got to work on my documentation.
At Boris FX, the employees tend to be there for a very long time. It's not like you hear about some of these Silicon Valley companies where people are hopping in and out of companies every year. Most of the staff is consistent over time. And in the first 10 years I was with Boris, it was almost the same crew that whole time. And then when we met up with the Mocha team in 2015, and then the Sapphire team, and now the Silhouette team, it totally opened my eyes to how many different ways there were to do things. And it's been so much fun to shake things up and realize that there's best practices, ideas over here that I didn't even know about. It's so that the expanded company has just it's been really enriching in terms of the quality of what we do, I think, because we're able to learn from each other. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would add to this company is very unique in the sense that it's a conglomeration of several groups of engineers who knew about each other for a very long time, and now had a chance to work together and actually look on each other's code and learn from each other much closer than obviously they were able to before. While they were at different companies at times, competing on the market at times. Yeah. So that is a very interesting aspect, which maybe not everyone on the programming or technical marketplace is familiar with that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting too, from my perspective, working with all of you guys for the last couple of years. Ultimately, what's happening is the customers are benefiting by this mergers and acquisitions that we've done, taking these teams, because we've been able to kind of take the very best of all these different tools and it really explore how they work together. Which for me is, I see my role as sort of the ultimate end user. So it's really exciting to interact with our customer base. That actually brings up a question, and maybe I'll ask Larissa this, which is how important is it for you to understand how the customers use our tools? And maybe you can sort of explain a little bit about about how features come into the team and how you kind of figure out what's next?
Good question. It is very important, obviously, to know what customers want. Like, there's not a lot of purpose in me going and spending anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months writing a new effect only to have everybody be like, I didn't need that. So right now, most of my input comes through Brian, Alan, Ben, Brownlee, and John Dickinson, many of which have been customers at various points of their life. But they, Brian also goes out and talks to customers at trade shows when we're, not stuck in our houses. And so, he will either hear about effects from customers when he interacts with them, or sometimes, we will come up with an effect idea and he will go talk to customers that he thinks might be interested in it and be like, is this useful to you? What would you need it to do? That kind of stuff. And, that we get a giant pile and we'll, sit there and be like, this one will take us a couple of weeks to do, this one will take us a couple of months to do. And we'll sort of weigh, how much time we have on a release versus how many customers we think will like something and how much time it will take to do. And obviously we have our forums with lots of beta users on it, and we get a lot of great feedback that way.
Yeah, I've really encouraged everyone who's viewing these live streams to check out our forums, because I know all of you are actually active on the forums. I know Paul and Jason, JP, I mean, they're very active in the product forums. So that's Brian's showing the forums on screen right now. We really encourage all our users to log into these forums, because you're not only interacting with our team, but you're also interacting with other users around the world. So, sometimes you might ask has anyone seen this, or, kind of brainstorm an idea. And it's just a great way to interact with the community that goes beyond just our team. So let's kind of talk a little bit about this. Jason, you mentioned the hosts, and let's just kind of open that up a bit. I mean, as a company, we support quite a lot of hosts. I think probably more than any other plugin manufacturer out there. We're not specializing in just Adobe or just Avid or, just Nuke, or for that matter. So how do you go about supporting all these hosts?
It depends on the task at hand. There are some, so each host has different capabilities and different sets of APIs. There's a lot of overlap, but in many cases they're not all the same. So After Effects has a 3D camera integration back with the host. So does Nuke, but say Premiere does not, and Resolve does not. So when you're planning features, you're often trying to juggle something that can work everywhere, hopefully, and if not, is it still a sensible feature, even if it can only work in a certain subset of hosts. When we're approaching a new effect, often it begins just one particular host, usually the one that launches the fastest. Programming is about iteration, really. You make a change and you check it, and you make a change and you check it, and the faster you can iterate like that, the faster you can get things done. So often we'll be working on the host that launches the fastest for that initial prototyping stage, and then it's a matter of going and doing the due diligence and making sure that it works the same in Avid as it does in AE, and it works on an AMD GPU the same as NVIDIA, and that it's the same on Mac as the same on Windows, and that it's going to work on the new Mac OS that's coming around the corner, and all those details that take up a lot of the programmer's time.
Yeah, it's interesting, because not only are we developing software that runs inside of hosts, but some of JP and Paul, we're also supporting native data for tracking and for roto, and and Jason mentioned camera formats. It's like there's quite a lot of juggling. How is that prioritized?
Prioritized? That's a good question. I don't know. we're at the stage in the company now where we're making really major releases every 6 months. So we have to be able to pursue longer term projects that are bigger than 6 month time frames, and those will be cooking along on the back burner at the same time as people are focused much more short term on what is being delivered in these next releases. So the prioritization there really comes from our product managers, or from my perspective. I can answer questions about what we can do and how long it'll take, but what really matters is our product managers who own that connection to the customer and can define what really matters to our users. So finding the places where we can make a big impact for users that are also technologically feasible in a reasonable time frame. That's where we prioritize.
Well, this might be a sort of interesting tee off this question, which is OFX. OFX is a open framework for plugins that a lot of our host partners do support. From most recently, Autodesk added it to Flame, and Blackmagic, and Nuke, and then there's also Magix Vegas Pro and HitFilm. Is OpenFX as open as one would think, who's not a programmer? And how does OpenFX work for us? Takers on that one?
Paul, why don't you take that? You know OFX from both sides, as the host and as the plugin.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we're kind of in an interesting or unique position because we've got a host. Actually, we have two hosts now, Silhouette and Optics itself, although we use that for a different reason, but and then also we have the plugins that plug into it. I think OFX is as open as you suggest. Being part of the OFX committee that develops features and comes up with things, this very active group in there. The pace of development of new features is rather slow because there's so many hosts with so many of their own inherent capabilities. A developer might come along and say, I would really like this new feature added, but maybe only a handful of hosts or only one can really, offer that feature. So there is some extent a little delay there, but features that make sense are pretty readily adopted, I would say, by some hosts, and then it goes through iterations. The goal is to have at least one plugin developer and one host vendor come together and add a feature, and then if it works, then it gets adopted. And it's a very well-designed API, I think. I really enjoy writing both ends of it myself.
Cool. JP, do you have anything you want to add about OFX?
Yeah, I think the great thing about OFX is it gets any questions about how the API is supposed to work out of the way most of the time. And yeah, you can start to support a new host very quickly when it supports OFX. And certainly it's actually a common question we get at trade shows. We'll be meeting a potential new host vendor. For example, somebody who's starting out developing an editor, or they already have an editor and it doesn't support plugins, and they're interested in integrating some of our technology into their application. And the first thing we would always say to them is, well, if you support OFX, then that's the easiest way to get into actually supporting our plugins. And really, I think the complexity comes sometimes where different hosts and different plugins, for that matter, use different parts of it. It's quite a big specification, and often when a new host decides they want to support OFX, they will take a particular plugin and they will try and load it and then implement everything that particular plugin needs. So then when you come along with a different plugin that's written against OFX, it might use something slightly different, and the host hasn't implemented that yet. So it crashes or doesn't work, and Mocha is actually a good example of that, because Mocha demands things like opening up a window, accessing frames at different times in the video, lots of more kind of analysis operations rather than a simpler effect that might take an image in and put an image out. So we often found that there were hosts. I mean, it's better now, but certainly when we started making Mocha for OFX, there were hosts where trying to fetch a frame at another point in time either didn't work at all or was severely limited. So that's something that I would say is a challenge with OFX, is that really somewhat inconsistent implementation of the standard. Besides, the other thing about writing plugins in general is just that when your code is running inside someone else's application, you don't necessarily, there can be side effects. So something that the host application does has an effect on your plugin, or vice versa, that you were not expecting. And that, those can be some of the most challenging things to debug in my experience. But yeah, overall, OFX is extremely positive, and definitely it's really sped up the ability for it to support new hosts.
Great. Well, there's a lot more we want to get to, and I think we also want to talk a little bit about the future, and you guys share some thoughts about the future. But before we do that, I thought that maybe we would just hear a little bit from the viewers in the chat. So Ben, if you're there, do you want to pose a couple questions?
I am here. We've got actually quite a lot of stuff. The chat's been buzzing. I mean, there's a lot of just love being sent your way. Like it's like seeing the Avengers, like everyone just assembled into the one place, which is great. And there's a lot of old hands talking about products past and tech of the past, which is really interesting. But I mean, and one of the really lovely comments, it's not so much a question as it's a comment, and it says you don't realize how many careers you've created with your amazing plugins and software. So, very grateful for the geniuses behind Sapphire and Boris. So, I mean, I think that's a lot of people's sentiments, is that, they're seeing the people here who have helped to make their careers, by producing the tools that they've been behind. And, I'm also exactly one of those people. My career has been built on Boris, Mocha, and Silhouette, and now everything is just all within this one company. I think the only question that I've got that is probably isn't talking about the future. I mean, it's talking about are there sort of ideas for branching out into industries that aren't just VFX, so things like video forensics, image restoration, technologies for those sort of sections, restoration, digitization, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I could
actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, JP. No, I was going to say that. There's the delay for you in the chat.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that actually it's pretty amazing that across all these products, how wide the customer base uses the tools. So even though we're developing tools for generally the entertainment industry, we call it the media and entertainment industry, the tools are used quite widely. I mean, in government and in forensics, in all kinds of different areas already. But that it might actually open it up to some questions as we talk about the future. But JP, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention a similar kind of thing, that we often, 99% of the queries we get are people doing visual effects or video editing. But on the Mocha side, we've had a number of situations where someone will approach us and say, I've seen your demo, I've seen you tracking these things. Can you help me to solve this completely unrelated problem? And I remember one guy who was analyzing ultra high speed X-rays of fuel injectors for vehicles using Mocha to track motion of like the nozzle of the injector, I think it was. And somebody recently who he was using it for civil engineering, and he was trying to analyze motion of bridges and he was flying a drone. He'd fly a drone out in the middle of the river with a camera on it and watch the center of the bridge and then track the motion of that relative to the drone, which I haven't actually seen any of the video for it, but we helped him quite a lot with this work. So yeah, people have come up with some really interesting alternative uses, especially for the tracking, and I'm sure that's the case with some of the other things, especially in Continuum. I would have thought some of the image restoration tools will have been used for lots of things besides what they were originally intended for.
Yeah, JP, what about this customer that we recently visited that was using, I think, Silhouette for rotoscoping medical photographs for training surgeons? Basically, it's I understood it somewhat replaces the physical, cutting and opening up bodies. I don't know. It was actually very inspiring for me to see that, to talk to this team and see how. But it's a general educational market where, especially nowadays a lot of education is online, virtual, and video editing products and compositing products are increasingly used to produce programming and produce courses. So that's another. It is sort of a part adjacent to the media and entertainment market. And of course, go ahead.
No, so absolutely. I mean, obviously, video is everywhere right now. We all have video in our pockets with the cell phones, and certainly with COVID and everything happening, video has just become a necessary part of our lives as we're all working remote, and it's really it's part of every industry right now. Boris, you just mentioned something which maybe is a good segue to talk about future kind of things, and I thought we'll just kind of kick around a couple of quick ideas about some topics that are sort of buzzworthy topics. We'll start with this one, which is cloud deployment of applications and virtual machines. We've seen a lot of customers, especially in COVID, who have moved, they can't go into their offices and work on fast computers, and so they're working remotely. So curious as to your own thoughts as to supporting the cloud industry as our customers sort of move to that kind of model.
This is clearly the direction of the future, in a sense that a lot of the resources, computing resources and systems, they could be shared, they could be virtualized, they could be more cloud-based and not focused, not concentrated on one location, and that's what customers are looking to do. Of course, there are technical challenges here, the bandwidth, the security issues are typically forefront in deploying those technologies, but that's where the whole world is moving.
Yeah, and for us internally, I mean, licensing, I know, Larissa, you've done a lot of the work on supporting, RLM in the company. Any thoughts about supporting the VM machines?
Sapphire, as far as, or more generally, RLM seems to install just fine on the virtual machines. The tricks get to be when people want to spin them up and shut them down very quickly. But I think that those are all solvable problems. The licensing is not my biggest concern. There's more graphics cards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing to think about, which is when you're working on the cloud, it's distributed rendering, and our software does take advantage of graphics cards for rendering, and whether the quality is going to be the same depending on what service you use or that kind of thing. What's the take on that? Or headless rendering?
Sapphire works fairly well with headless rendering, but when that's for background renders once the person's all done. But does your VM and remote desktop setup allow access to the graphics driver for even rendering our Flare Editor UI, which the UI itself does use some OpenGL, which does require some sort of graphics card to back it. And we, each VM solution has slightly different caveats on the driver, and trying to navigate all of those different setups is going to be the challenge, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, JP.
Yeah, we've seen similar challenges, I think, getting Mocha working in the cloud, and many customers are now using it in that kind of setup. But one of the biggest problems is just like getting pixels on the screen over whatever remote connection it is. Some of the remote desktop technology, the more basic stuff, just is not viable for this kind of software. So there, it's about educating people to make sure that they're using Teradici or something like that, and provided they're using those solutions, it basically works pretty well at this point.
And a lot of our tools, are based on very, very finite, refined on-screen tools where we're dragging around pixels that could be 4K or higher, and our customers are working on feature films. So I don't know, Paul, what do you think? How about working in something like rotoscoping or paint on a cloud system? Is that something that our customers are going to be doing?
Yeah, they're already doing it, and you're right. It's fiddly work. And when the pandemic hit and companies started having to work from home, there was a brief window where they were asking us about how to speed it up and things like that. And our first question was, well, what cloud platform delivery system are you using? And eventually all those problems went away, and they've been using it for months. And I haven't heard of any bad problems with it recently. I think it works pretty well. Like JP said, though, it just depends on the service that you're using.
Yeah, I think a lot of our customers actually are working in cloud deployments right now, all across the world, really. So it's definitely quite interesting time. As far as GPU goes, a lot of our software does take advantage of GPU. And the industry is rapidly changing with new GPU cards coming out all the time. Lots of pressure, or lots of interest in real-time rendering. I don't know if someone wants to take a stab at this. What's as a company, what are we doing with GPU?
It's going to vary from product to product a lot.
Yeah, but traditionally, Boris FX and all the products and companies that joined Boris FX have been very, very interested in faster processing on the graphics cards. And let's understand that graphics cards are basically an afterthought. First, it was a computer with very simple input-output, and then more flashy graphics user interfaces and images came about, and then computer architects, they kind of jammed another set of processors on the side to help out with processing, displaying all this fancy graphics. So that created this kind of symbiosis or synergy between what's called the central processing unit, CPU, and the graphics unit, or GPU. And that's the world we still live in. And it's a very challenging setup, because you always have to move images from CPU to GPU, from GPU to CPU over the system bus. And that really creates a lot of latency and a lot of headache for the programmers who have to deal with this. So this is why I'm very excited about what Apple's doing now with Apple Silicon, where it's going to be more what's called computer-on-a-chip architecture, where everything is multiple processors, large number of processors live on the same silicon chip, and that latency hopefully will be avoided in the future. So basically we're going to be with what we would think is GPU, memory will actually be a common memory, and we'll be able to easily and fastly access it. So It is interesting to see where the world is going and how it's transforming. But currently, Boris FX products support OpenGL, OpenCL, any other open two-letter acronym that we can think of. CUDA, which is NVIDIA language, NVIDIA compiler, and we are very actively looking into Metal because working on Metal because Metal seems to be the future of Apple multi-processing strategy or GPU strategy, and it will be definitely will be part of Apple Silicon. So the new generation processors. So in the future, that problem could be solved for us. It's very exciting, actually, to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot always, supporting new developments and trying to, be one step ahead of the industry is certainly an ongoing challenge for a technology company like ourselves. What does the team think of advancements in AI, machine learning? And, there's obviously a lot of interest in this area in the entertainment industry.
JP, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, JP, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, certainly looking at it from a computer vision perspective, the whole AI, machine learning revolution has just completely changed computer vision. Yeah, so computer vision, for anyone who's not familiar, this is the idea of computer software that can use cameras to understand its environment. And motion tracking is part of computer vision, so it's a computer vision technology. And yeah, that whole field really felt like it had slowed down until about 10 or so years ago, maybe a little bit less, when we started to see development of deep learning and starting to solve problems that people had been trying to solve with traditional approaches for a very long time and never got anywhere. So we're now at a point where quite a few of those sorts of problems are starting to be really quite well solved by the research community. And we're starting to get to the point where it's becoming interesting to look at deploying those sorts of technologies in our own software. So it's certainly something I'm very interested in, looking for opportunities to take that machine learning research and apply it to the problems that our users have. I think one of the big challenges, though, is to make sure that we build things that are not a black box. It needs to be assistive technology for an artist, not something where you throw images in at one end and maybe it gets it right, maybe it doesn't, and if it doesn't, you've got no way to influence that. And certainly some of the things I've seen so far, really they're a bit like that. Very limited in terms of control or ability to say get a result that is maybe 90% of the way there, but then to do that last 10% of refinement that actually makes it usable. So yeah, anything we do, I think that will be the biggest challenge, will be to make something that's really under the control of the artists and it's an assistant rather than just a black box that works or not.
Yeah, that's actually a big challenge and a big problem, because machine learning in general is not user or operator assisted very much. It's not user controllable. And that is if we're talking about deep learning. It's like machine learning itself existed for a very long time. And then in the 80s, where I actually was going to school, there was, neural networks already existed, but they were not deemed practical because the computers were not fast enough or not powerful enough to deal with any inferences, any results or even training in reasonable time, and reasonable time meaning many months. So it's very hard to develop a system where the end result of your work will only be apparent many months later. So, but then what happened recently is it's not so much the understanding of neural network advanced, although it has, is the computing power increased dramatically. especially the multi-processing graphics cards, such as NVIDIA cards, and applying training of models and inferring results on test sets have become much more practical. But basically, it always boils down to creating a training set, and that is, kind of like set of inputs and set of potential outputs, or favorable outputs, and putting them through this complicated piece of software and training what's called a model, which is basically a set of weights and a set of some rules about nodes, and then trying the results, testing the results. And then if you don't like it, then you change the training set or you change the rules of your model. A lot of this is experimentation. And I do have some friends in, computational complexity circles, and people who do, math and computer science, as science. And they all argue that they actually don't understand why deep learning works as well as it does. So it's basically the biggest surprise of our times, that it's pretty amazing sometimes to see the results of machine learning. Like even simple things. Yeah, you put in a picture of banana, it tells you it's banana. How does it know? Right? And it's very hard to make this mental connection from, all right, yeah, there's like 1,000 images of bananas, and they all have those yellow pixels in certain order. And then, yeah, you tell the machine, okay, this is the banana. But then another image would have those yellow pixels in totally unrelated different spots. So very, very interesting. And but it's definitely changing the way a lot of the industries, including media and entertainment, including visual effects, is going to be affected by machine learning in the future. We're very much in the experimentation stage, and I always worry how artists will accept that, or how artists will react to that, where what they think is their God-given ability to create something beautiful or something even right is done by a dumb machine, a computer. So that's definitely something to something that's interesting to see in the future, how that will evolve. But from our product perspective, yes, we are very interested in actually very actively following all the developments in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also echo what JP was saying, which is I think that because our customers are, they make their livelihood with our tools. So we just have to, we're certainly really interested in employing the machine learning AI techniques into our tools, but ultimately we want to make sure that we're not developing black box tools where the artist can't make that final say, because you don't want to paint yourself into a corner on a particular shot or project and then have to start all over because there's not really the tool is not exposed to the user. So that's definitely a really important concern, is the usability of any tool that we develop. Well, guys, we're winding down on time here, and I thought it would just be fun to ask a couple silly questions or fun questions, quick ones. I'll kick it around really quickly, but let's say, Larissa, what tool or effect are you most proud of that you've worked on in Sapphire over the years?
I think Zap is my favorite, even though Carl did the initial implementation and I, added things, like I added the splines and stuff to it. It still reminds me of Star Wars. So it's my favorite.
Oh, that's awesome. And Jason, for you, there's certainly a lot of younger people, tune into these sessions. And is there any advice that you would give to someone who's trying to get into this industry? Yeah.
Well, there's some really cheap ways in the door. You can get started training-wise with an astounding amount of material we offer, and of course everybody else offers, and we have very cheap entry points into the software with the new monthly subscriptions we have. So it's really about a matter of just getting started, of doing it, and if you can find someone to apprentice with, someone to throw ideas around with, or someone to work collaboratively with, it's a great way to be able to share that kind of information that you need to build those skills.
Cool. Hey, Paul, I'll ask you a question. If you had no limits, what project would you work on? What would, if you could make any kind of product, any kind of software, any kind of programming project, what would you actually work on?
Oh boy.
It's a big
one. Threw me a wrench there. It is a big one. I like the "what are you proud of" best one better, but
well, please.
Boy, I don't know. I love writing software. I've written VFX software for a long time, but I've written other stuff too. And but I think I would like to just. Oh boy, this is tough. I'd like to keep working on Silhouette as long as possible. I think it's been my favorite thing I've ever done, and I think it's got plenty of opportunities for expansion, and I would just want to just keep working on it.
Well, you have a lot to be proud there on the Silhouette, Paul. I mean, this tool has been used on probably every nominated visual effects film for Academy Awards and Best Visual Effects for 10 years or more, right? And so you certainly have a lot to be proud of there. It's such a great tool. JP, what kind of music have you been? Yeah, here's a question for JP. JP, what music have you been listening to the most during COVID?
My children
JP gets the easy
singing. The songs from Hamilton.
I went through the Hamilton phase with my daughter a couple of years ago too. It's fun stuff. And Boris, I'll kick this last one back to you. How do you see the industry changing? In the next couple of years, and how is Boris FX going to prepare for this?
That's a very open-ended question.
True.
Yeah, definitely the industry is growing, and the media and entertainment industry is growing, and it's becoming much more sophisticated and complex, and much more also consumer oriented. So, what I started watching movies, when I was a kid, and I realized now all these movies that I watched were basically the creation of one person. It was the director who created the movie, and the actors sort of played their roles and said their lines. But now I see that it's a much more collaborative and much more industrialized process. You see, like every frame of the video that we watch today on Netflix is being very heavily processed. There's nothing that comes out of the camera, literally nothing. And the old time entertainment, basically you see what the camera recorded on celluloid. And it was just spliced up, and there you go, and you consume it. So in that sense, it kind of gives me good sense that our products are very, very much relevant and necessary in this process, and it gives me that sense that our customers will always find employment and will always bring home paychecks because their work is increasingly in demand. It's just a natural process of media and entertainment evolution and development. That's as broad strokes as I can put it, probably.
Yeah, I'll take that as a good answer. I think with Netflix and the nature of content these days, everything is so graphically oriented, compositing, visual effects, and everything that we're looking at. Beyond that, it's not even looking, we see visual effects on Instagram and everywhere. So, yeah, no, it's very interesting time to be in this industry.
Plus the color, plus you mentioned compositing, plus the conforming to different formats, plus cleaning, restoration, improving, just goes on and on. Okay. And that's why I see the mission of our company. That's what we do for our customers.
Well, guys, I thank you all for your time and joining on this call. I think that people are quite interested in the chat. Ben, you've been manning the chat there.
Yeah, it's been popping off the whole thing. People are very, very enthusiastic. There's been so much love coming through the chat. It's been amazing.
And we need to send that love back out to them too, because absolutely. we get to help you make art for a living. I don't have to sit and program insurance software. This is really fun stuff. So, and we owe that debt to you as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I've got one last, and this is a big and very important question for Boris. Who created the falling sheep transition in the Amiga video toaster? Is that something you can answer? You can't. No, not you.
I have no idea.
But we do know who created the first cube transition for Avid, right?
Yeah.
I have created the first video cube. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say first, computer-based video cube. There were video cube transitions on switchers and effects boxes before me. Sony, Panasonic, Grass Valley, Kaleidoscope, all those devices. The video cube was the basic staple. What's interesting is that those video cubes were not actually perfect cubes because they were transformed by the aspect ratio, so they were not square.
Yes. No, that's wonderful. There's so much history, in this live stream. It's absolutely fantastic, and I could personally just sit and listen to these stories for hours and hours on end, and that's kind of what I like IBC to be. That's part of what all the trade shows are for me, is to get together with people and just chat over beers or over a cocktail and stuff. And this isn't the same, but this is as close as we're going to get. And I think this is the most the development talent that's been in one room at any time that I've ever seen at Boris FX. So this is wonderful. It's been a great opportunity here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I want to add there are some more people in the company who are not here on the screen, but who were basically founding team members of Avid, Media 100, Elastic Reality, ICE, Imagineer Mocha, Media Illusion. The list goes on and on. And many of them are actually part of our company, and I'm so happy and so proud to have them on board. And this gives me the assurance that we will create many more great products, no less great than the products that came before.
Absolutely. And I've just been told that we have some of those other team members in the chat as well. So unfortunately, because of technical reasons, we couldn't get more people in this box. I would love to have someone there, and I'd love to have someone there, but unfortunately, due to technical limitations, we're kind of stuck with with just the huge pool of talent. It really is an embarrassment of kittens, as they say. But thank you very much, everyone. We unfortunately have to say goodbye to Virtual IBC 2020, but not before we give away some prizes. So I'm going to say goodbye to Boris, goodbye to JP, goodbye to Larissa, goodbye to Jason, goodbye to Paul, and goodbye to Ross as well. Thank you so much for being here for this presentation. And Ross, thank you very much for being here for the whole day. I am going to be sending the ship home now. So goodbye, everyone.